My dear students, this is Mahbooba Sultanaki, Senior Lecturer of Milestone College, Department of Biology. My today's topic is Transportation in Organism. This is from chapter 6. My learning objectives are the definitions of transpiration, stomatal transpiration, cuticular transpiration, lenticular transpiration. From my today's topic, you will be able to explain why transpiration is known as necessary evil and absorption of water, importance of transpiration. Okay? Now, what is transpiration? Transpiration is a physiological process through which the plant absorbs water and that is carried by the plants, which is released to the atmosphere in the form of water vapor, is known as transpiration. This water is released to the atmosphere through the aerial pores. Okay. Now, the definition of transpiration: the physiological process by which water is carried through plants and then released to the atmosphere in the form of water vapor through aerial pores is called transpiration. Actually, through transpiration, excess water is released from the plant body. Okay, now transpiration is of three types. It is mainly on the basis of the nature through which the plant is released from the water is released from the plant's body. Okay. First of all, stomatal transpiration. What is stomatal transpiration? The transpiration that takes place through the stomata is known as stomatal transpiration. Stomata are the tiny pores which are guarded by guard cells, or which is surrounded by guard cells, which are found on the upper and lower surface of leaves and the petals on other parts of the leaves is known as stomata. So the transpiration that takes place through stomata is known as stomatal transpiration. About 95% of transpiration takes place through stomata. Okay. Then cuticular transpiration. What is cuticular transpiration? The transpiration that takes place through the cuticle layer is known as, or cuticle is called cuticular transpiration. Now, what is cuticle layer? Cuticle layer is a layer of cutin, a chemical substances which are found at the upper and the lower surface of the leaves. So, what is cuticular transpiration? The transpiration that takes place through the cuticle layer is known as cuticular transpiration. Now, next one is lenticular transpiration. What is lenticular transpiration? The transpiration that takes place through the lenticule is known as lenticular transpiration. Now, what is lenticule? Lenticule is a pore. It is also developed during the secondary growth of a plant. During the secondary growth of a plant, aggregation of cells are found on the ruptured barks. Through these ruptured barks, it forms a tiny pore through which the lenticular transpiration takes place. Now, if you want to define what is lenticular transpiration, you can define it as the transpiration that takes place through the lenticule is known as lenticular transpiration. Now, the importance of transpiration. That means the role of transpiration. Transpiration plays an important role in maintaining the metabolic activities. The metabolic activities of living plant cell are dependent on this process. Number 2, a suction force is developed in the xylem channel by which a plant absorbs water and minerals through their root hairs. Number 3, if the suction force decreases, that means the suction force which is produced due to transpiration, if that suction force decreases, the absorption of water will also decrease, which results the metabolic activities along the production of food will be slow. Number 4, in the mesophyll of a leaf, a diffusion pressure deficit is developed, which helps in absorption of water. Number 5, a plant keeps the temperature in the cells of leaves within a certain range by continuously reducing the thermal energy absorbed by the mesophyll tissue. These are the roles of transpiration. Though transpiration plays a very important role in case of survival of plants, it also has some demerits also. What are those? If the rate of transpiration is higher than that of the absorption of water, then by continuously reducing water, the plant may die. In winter season, what happens? In winter season, the level of water is fallen down, and in that case, the transpiration continues as it was before, or as it is before, but the rate of absorption of water decreases. So for the survival of the plants, these plants shed their leaves. Another thing, if the rate of transpiration decreases, the rate of absorption of water or osmosis will also decrease. For having all these merits, scientists, Curtis term this transpiration as necessary evil. So if the transpiration plays a very important role, it also has some demerits also. Okay, for that, after having those demerits, but it plays a very important role in the survival of for the survival of the plants. Now the topic is absorption of water. What does absorption of water means? Absorption of water means the process through which the plant absorbs water is known as absorption of water. In your textbook, this diagram is given. Most of the students don't know, or sometimes they don't understand what is given in this diagram. Okay, first of all, I will explain what is mentioned in this diagram, okay, so that it becomes easier for you to understand the diagram. Okay, this is the transverse section of a root. This is the transverse section. These are the root hairs. So what does this diagram mean? The diagram means that this portion of root hair or root is cut off from that diagram, and that portion is given here. Okay, so at the center of this diagram there are the xylem or vessel present, from where the water is taken up to the leaves. This diagram represents, if we examine or we observe this diagram, what we will find. We will find that this is the root hair, the outer surface, this is the outer surface, and this is known as epidermis. Inside the epidermis, inside this borderline, these are the cortex. There is the cortex. Then next to the cortex there is endodermis, which is marked by red color. Okay, then inside the diagram there is another layer of cell. Actually this is known as pericycle. Inside the pericycle, these are the vascular bundles, especially the vessel of xylem tissue. Now if I explain the absorption process of water, what will be that? Plant actually absorb capillary water from the soil. Now what is capillary water? The water molecules that are present in between the soil particles. These are the soil particles, and the blue color indicates the water molecules. The water molecules that are present in between the soil particles is called capillary water. This water is absorbed by the root hairs, because root hair can easily absorb the capillary water from the soil. So what is given here? Plants generally absorb capillary water from the soil through their roots. The diffusion pressure deficit in a cell of a leaf is developed because of transpiration. Due to transpiration, diffusion pressure deficit is developed, where it is developed in the leaves. There are lots of cells are present in the leaves. So due to transpiration, excess water is coming out or released from the plants. So when the water comes out from the leaves, there develop a deficient pressure deficit, or there is a deficiency of water. The deficient pressure deficit in a cell of a leaf is developed because of transpiration. Then water moves towards the cell from the adjacent cell. If we think about that, from this cell water is released to the atmosphere. Then this cell will absorb water from the adjacent cell. Okay. After that, in the same way, deficient pressure deficit is developed in the second cell, and water moves to it from the adjacent cell. So when water is absorbed from the second cell or the next cell, then deficient pressure deficit will also develop in this cell. Then what happened? The second cell will also absorb water from the next adjacent cell. So thus suction force is developed. In this way, a continuous deficient pressure deficit is extended up to the root hair, and a suction force is developed. If this cell releases water, then it will take water from this cell, and then when this cell is if there is a deficiency of water in this cell, it will absorb water from the next one. Thus, this way, water is taken up into the root hairs, moves through the cortex. This is the cortex. Up to the cortex, the water reaches to the root hair. Then the water moves from the cortex to the endodermis, the pericycle, and finally into the vascular bundle. From the root hair, it reaches to the cortex. From the cortex, it reaches to the endodermis, and finally to the vascular bundle, that means the vessel of xylem. Water having entered into the vascular bundle, it is taken up and flow laterally through the xylem tissue. What happens? It happens when water enters into this vascular bundle or the xylem tissue, then it laterally flows. This water flows laterally. This water, the water flowing through the different branch and branchlets of the plants, and ultimately reaches to the leaves. And this is accomplished by the active involvement of osmosis and transpiration. So if I again repeat this total process, the plant absorbs generally capillary water through the roots. These roots have lots of root hairs. Through these root hairs, water is entered into the root hair, then cortex, then endodermis, and finally the vascular bundle. Okay, this is the absorption of water. Okay, so from my today's topic, you can define transpiration, stomatal transpiration, cuticular transpiration, lenticular transpiration, cuticle, stomata, then lenticule. Moreover, you will be able to explain the importance of transpiration, and finally I have discussed the absorption process of water. That's all for today. In the next class, I will be back with a new lesson. Till then, goodbye.